12 seconds. That's all Jasmine Crockett needed to bury Trump's entire empire right in front of America. He told her to go back to the kitchen. She didn't argue. She opened a folder, and everything Trump had hidden for 14 years detonated on live national television. Watch how one woman turned silence into a political bombshell that crushed the Trump name inside the halls of Congress. In just 12 seconds, Donald Trump unleashed 7 words like daggers on live national television. Women like you belong in the kitchen. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch, she exploded. With one searing revelation, she exposed a secret he had hidden for 14 years. The room didn't just gasp, it shattered. What did America's sitting president try to bury, and why did a daughter's rage make him regret every camera ever turned on? The red tally light flickered once, then held steady in a cold, unrelenting gaze. Live broadcast, no cuts, no do-overs. Room 214-inch, the Capitol Oversight Chamber turned into the most perilous spot in the nation, not from bullets or bombs, but from raw truth amplified by a microphone and a country on the edge of its seat. The United States SEAL loomed over the witness table like a silent judge, weary from witnessing endless wrongs. Jasmine Crockett sat composed, not rigid, not restless, just utterly calm. Her dark blue suit gleamed under the harsh lights like forged armor, and her gaze never wavered from the man opposite her. That man was President Donald J. Trump, positioned not as a rally leader, not as a power broker, but as a witness in a live oversight hearing on gender discrimination, economic undermining, and the suppression of minority workers. The sort of hearing no president had ever been hauled into while under oath. Until this moment. Her tone was measured and intentional. Mr. President, during the 2020 fiscal year, your administration secretly shifted more than 143,000 single working mothers to temporary contractor status, denying them essential benefits. 87% of them were women of color. Care to elaborate on that? Trump eased back in his chair, as if lounging in a familiar pew. Another rambling question, he grumbled. The chamber let out uneasy laughs. Cameras pulled in closer. Then he grinned. Let me put it this way, he said, flicking his hand like swatting a pesky fly. Women like you would serve better stirring pots in a kitchen than poking around in politics. The phrase struck with the force of a velvet-gloved fist, gentle in tone, brutal in force. No outcry, no uproar, just a heavy quiet. Even the microphones seemed to hold their breath. The C-SPAN sound captured the thickening hush like thunder about to crack. All over America, audiences halted mid-breath, jaws dropping. In a Michigan nursing home, a veteran's spouse murmured, "Did he really say that?" In an Atlanta tavern, a patron's beer glass slipped from his grip. On Twitter, the hashtag KitchenGate erupted in under 4 seconds. But Jasmine stayed rooted, not a muscle twitched. She didn't bat an eye, she didn't recoil. Instead, she gently lowered her gaze, not in defeat, but in careful strategy. And for a full 5 seconds, the entire country observed her calculated pause. Trump let out a chuckle, convinced he had delivered the knockout punch. His lawyers traded smug glances. Even Representative Jordan edged forward, mouth twisted as if poised to join the fray. The setup was perfect. Everyone braced for the predictable response. Fury, sobs, a heated eruption, something to validate the slur he had just flung like poison across the polished floor. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't molded to fit their assumptions. She extended her hand toward her water glass. Steady, almost robotic. Her fingertips rapped once, twice on the wooden surface. The noise reverberated like a countdown in a thriller. And then, nothing yet. Across the room, a woman journalist breathed into her microphone. Tension is mounting. She's not crumbling. She's plotting. Online viewers swarm the chats. She's eerily calm. She's about to dismantle him. What's hidden in that file? Because right next to her, aligned precisely on the table, rested a faded brown folder. Its edge slightly worn a corner of paper, jutting out like a primed explosive, ready to ignite. Jasmine hadn't laid a finger on it. Not at this point. But its mere existence shouted louder than any quiet could. Nobody knew its contents, but every watcher sensed it. Whatever lurked inside that folder wasn't solely hers. It tied back to him. And when she finally unveiled it, it wouldn't be a shield. It would be an annihilation. What hidden reality was concealed so thoroughly that it required a daughter's composure to drag it into the light on national television? President Trump overlooked the quiet. Or perhaps he noticed and mistook it for surrender. He pushed forward now, fueled by the stillness, confusing it for compliance. That's the issue with this panel. He went on his volume, rising his arrogance, swelling. You prioritize sentiment over strategy, emotions over evidence, and women like her, he motioned with a casual wave of two fingers, dismissive and offhand, get handed authority because they perform tears so convincingly on screen. The phrases poured out like fuel. And beyond those capital barriers, the blaze ignited immediately. Alerts pinged on devices before he wrapped up his remark. Breaking news, Trump instructs Rep. Crockett to return to the kitchen. The hashtag sit her down climbed to number 2 in 90 seconds flat. Jasmine Crockett soared to number 1 in under 4. MSNBC pundits lapsed into shocked hush. A CNN anchor breathed. He essentially gutted the 19th Amendment live. A Fox commentator attempted a deflection. Obviously a jest, but even his partner arched a brow. Twitter fractured and ignited. Some snickered, others fumed, but nobody ignored it. Within the chamber, Jasmine stayed immobile. Her pen lingered just over the notepad, its point frozen, her breathing deliberate. Then a subtle shift, she wrapped her fingers around the pen not to jot notes, but to steady herself. Her knuckles paled. Her pulse wasn't pounding. It was honing. In that instant, her thoughts drifted from the chamber to a sweltering kitchen in South Dallas, the summer of 1998. She was 12. Her mother Dolores stood shoeless on chipped tiles, juggling 3 pans on a dual-burner stove and a hot iron in her grasp. She was fusing the grip of a cooking device she had devised, using adhesive tape, metal scraps, and a discarded measuring stick. Jasmine recalled the sizzle of grease, the snap of her mother's arm, the scars on her digits. You create from the scraps they hand you, Dolores had uttered once, and they seldom hand us plenty. She remembered her mother's exhale when she posted the patent form. The optimism, the dread, and the void that followed when replies never arrived. And then the void morphed into anger when another claimed her creation without crediting her. Jasmine murmured, now barely audible. You have no clue what you've unleashed, Trump pressed on. This is the flaw with diversity hires. Place an attractive face at a lectern, and abruptly opinions abound. Another grin. Another wrist flick. Another figure assuming he could quip his way past flames. But he missed it. He missed how Jasmine's gaze had transformed. Not dilated, not damp, but razor-sharp and exact. He failed to see that composure wasn't fragility. It was restraint. The way a tempest stills right before the heavens tear apart. Because a force was gathering, and it wasn't mere wrath. It was something chillier, more calculated, more ready, like a fuse awaiting the spark. And the globe was tuned in. What unfolds when the man who sought to wipe out a legacy hears it declared on live broadcast? Jasmine's hush wasn't withdrawal. It was realignment. She blinked once gradually, then inclined forward and tweaked the microphone, like aligning a weapon. Her words emerged low, distinct, and exact, bearing not the quiver of feeling, but the accuracy of a trigger being set. Since kitchens are the topic, Mr. President, she stated, her stare fixed on him, permit me to present one instrument your domain relied on for a dozen years. Trump blinked, puzzled for the initial time. Jasmine extended into her satchel with purposeful poise and extracted a tattered beige folder. No emblems, no flair, just a government emblem and an imprinted patent code. She positioned it on the table with the gentleness of sealing a grave. The lens focused. Dolores Crockett 1991 U.S. patent, 4,561 Kelvin. The name struck the chamber like a halted inhale. Audiences leaned nearer in dens, pubs, clinics, detention centers, senior facilities. Nobody uttered a sound. They merely gazed at the name, the year, the woman clutching it. Jasmine unfolded the folder. The sheet within was frayed, subtly discolored, but undeniable. The diagram of a patented heat-proof adjustable cooking grip, one deployed in countless professional kitchens nationwide, including all Trump Tower setups from 2002 to 2014. Trump fidgeted. A spasm of flutter sufficient to reveal the quake. Jasmine's tone didn't escalate, it didn't require it. My mother, Dolores Crockett, crafted the device your cooks handled daily. They dubbed it the Edge. She constructed it with tape, leftover alloy, and her raw palms, while nurturing 3 children and juggling dual roles. She pivoted the paper toward the cameras. So indeed, we do fit in the kitchen because we engineered it. Sharp inhales dotted the space like embers on parched grass. Journalists gripped their writing tools firmer. One lawmaker inclined ahead and breathed. Is this legitimate? Aides hurried to confirm the patent digitally. It required fewer than 30 seconds. The entry existed open, lawful, irrefutable. On displays, viewers witnessed the split image. Jasmine on one half serene and determined. On the other Trump, abruptly motionless, his grin dissolving like a fading blemish. Twitter detonated once more. Dolores Crockett the Edge, she forged. Not your domain. A veteran African-American cook from Philadelphia streamed live on Instagram yelling, amid sobs, I wielded that grip every shift for 10 years, and I never realized it originated from someone like us. And yet Jasmine wasn't finished. She nudged the folder nearer to the table's rim like a tribute or a caution. You didn't merely utilize her creation, she declared. You obscured her identity. You profited immensely from her blueprint and offered her zero. No recognition, no respect, not even recollection. Trump attempted to interject, but his audio muted as C-SPAN prioritized the active speaker. And for the first occasion that day, the quiet belonged to him. Jasmine gazed straight into the lens, not as a lawmaker, but as a child reclaiming a pilfered heritage. What transpires when a concealed identity turns into the igniter, and the entire globe clutches the wick? Before the quiet, before the file, before a name forced a president to hesitate, there were Dolores's palms. They were never delicate. The flesh cracked during winters, toughened in summers marked by oil and cleansers, occasionally bandaged, but always active. To her children, they were both guide and memorial. The palms that mixed broth, mended ripped garments, dried tears, and in unseen hours sketched plans on the reverses of shopping lists with a Lent pen. Young Jasmine would observe from the dining spot, legs dangling, chin propped on her forearms, striving to grasp what her mother drafted. It's for folks with weary wrists, Dolores confided once without glancing up, so they can cook over heat without stooping constantly. The draft appeared modest. A curved bar, a swiveling fastener, a padded hold fashioned from hose remnants. She sliced from a faulty drain line, but in Dolores's vision, it was all dignity forged in iron and legacy. In the 1,992nd patent procedures weren't designed for women like her. She dispatched the initial packet with shaky palms and a fortnight's food funds. No counsel, no funding, just aspirations sealed in stamps and belief. The denial arrived swiftly. So did the subsequent and the following. The wording remained consistent. Inadequate records, not marketable, unfinished technical sketch. Dolores didn't sob. She refined each iteration for 3 years. She drew during pauses between work hours, experimented with fresh versions using foil and elastic, scorched herself twice, yet persisted. She once bartered a cake commission for a couple hours of guidance from a local college tech pupil. The day the approval note reached Jasmine was 10. Dolores unsealed it, standing barefooted on the veranda, her work smock still knotted at her midsection. She didn't yell. She didn't rejoice. She merely released a breath like emerging from submersion. Patent granted. Crockett Dolores of 45,611 Kelvin. She affixed it to the cooler beside Jasmine's grades. Jasmine recalled fingering the emblem and inquiring, "What comes next?" Dolores grinned, not broadly but profoundly. Now we observe if the globe takes note, and for a brief period it did. A minor cookware vendor in Ohio contacted. Then one in New Jersey. A neighborhood eatery network proposed purchasing 50 pieces. Dolores assembled them manually in the evenings, each bundled in plain wrapping and bound with cord like an unsolicited but vital offering. She sought no celebrity. She merely desired her identity on something enduring. But eventually the inquiries ceased. The requests evaporated, and years on, Jasmine spotted her mother's concept in a Trump Tower cookware brochure. No identity, no acknowledgement, no hint. That's when she grasped that some treasures are taken not by violence, but by omission. And some palms never gain remembrance unless a child compels the world to recall. The contact arrived on a drizzly Tuesday, right after Dolores had seared her hand, fusing the 34th grip that month. Jasmine was tackling schoolwork in the Nook, using a faulty calculator and the reverse of a religious pamphlet. The phone rang once, twice. On the third, Dolores responded, grease lingering on her palms. The man's tone was refined, smooth, rehearsed. He claimed to represent a large nationwide lodging conglomerate that had viewed her item via a local supplier. He avoided naming Trump initially, just a patron with upscale cook spaces needing expandable advancements. Dolores listened, head tilting slowly, eyes squinted. They admired her blueprint, desired to order 120 units, but first required privileges. Production, circulation, and another element. A provision ensuring exclusive discretion. She didn't comprehend the phrase, but she knew hardship. Her rent lagged 3 weeks. Her sibling had recently learned of stage 2 cancer, and Jasmine had overgrown her sole footwear. So when the man proposed $18,000 in advance, more than she had ever possessed, and assurances of further payments post-launch, Dolores consented. The agreement materialized overnight. 3 sheets fastened dense with jargon and tiny text. She scanned it twice. She didn't grasp every part, but the term non-disclosure pact stood prominent, underlined in blue. She marked one sentence with, "Inc. client holds authority to rebrand, retitle, or eliminate creator details from item wrapping and promotion." Dolores paused. She pondered, what's vital acclaim or sustaining the home she endorsed? What ensued played out like a stealthy theft. In 6 months, her concept surfaced in every Trump lodging cook space across the land. The grip refined marginally, but clearly hers was abruptly labeled as the Gold Grip TM Ergonomic KitchenAid. Trump Tower, New York, Mar-a-Lago, Chicago, Las Vegas, all outfitted with an instrument that originated on her splintered dining surface. No reference to Dolores, no image, no gratitude, only hush and the gradual awareness that her identity had been purchased, interred and purged from the annals. She dialed once, twice, left messages unanswered. The supplier who initiated contact had departed. The voicemail overflowed. She tried again from a coin phone. This time, void. Then the payment checks halted. She sought to resist. Consulted a nearby attorney. He requested the pact. She provided it. After 5 minutes, he shook his head. You relinquished everything. They possess the title now. You can't publicly assert ownership without violating the NDA. Dolores inclined, her head subdued, vanquished but unbroken. She never informed Jasmine, but Jasmine sensed it. She observed it in her mother's palms, once brimming with ingenuity, now sluggish, muted, wary around metal. She noted how her mother no longer viewed hotel cook areas identically like beholding a offspring in another's guise. The globe had seized her instrument. Jasmine wouldn't permit it to seize her legacy. The first time Dolores attempted to bargain anew, she didn't demand much. Merely a discussion, a dialogue, her identity on the wrapping of the very item she forged. She penned a note on lined pad paper directed to the supplier who first reached out. I'd appreciate credit for my blueprint, she inscribed, for my child's benefit, if not mine. The note went unreturned. She pursued with a call. I'm not seeking funds, she stated. I simply want visibility. The clerk vowed to relay the note. Weeks elapsed. Nothing materialized. Then emerged the periodical feature. Jasmine discovered it at the Market Register Hotel and Food Innovations, Spring 2003 issue. A complete-page spotlight, groundbreaking instruments powering Trump's food realm. There, it resided, her mother's blueprint. Now termed the Gold Grip TM Pro Grip, attributed to an in-house development squad of the Trump Food Unit. No nod to the woman who fused the model over sizzling grease. Dolores uttered nothing. She merely ripped the sheet, creased it once, and stowed it in the compartment next to the utility statement. Jasmine uncovered it 7 days later. It worsened. The instrument earned an internal efficiency honor for slashing kitchen harm by 32%. A detail lauded in company memos, employee notices, and even a media statement from Trump Lodging's headquarters. The media hailed it brilliant. Dolores deemed it recognizable. She posted one ultimate note, this time to Trump. Lodging's directly verified, endorsed. She enclosed a duplicate of her patent, a sequence of exchanges, and a lone phrase. You didn't conceive this. I did. All I request is naming. 3 weeks on a bulky packet arrived, not with remorse but admonition. Within was an official missive from Trump's legal squad recalling her of the NDA provision she had endorsed. Any open assertion of origin will breach the agreement and trigger legal measures, including loss of residual payments and potential penalties. Dolores ceased efforts, but Jasmine commenced vigilance. She remarked how her mother would halt at ads for Trump Tower, lips compressed. How she switched channels when a specific name surfaced. How her gaze drifted to that compartment more frequently, as if tormented by creased paper. Years flowed. Jasmine attended law studies, evolved into what her mother never achieved, a legal counterpart. And one summer night while home, she ultimately opened the ancient compartment and located the initial NDA. She sat on the cook floor and perused it by oven glow. Every provision, every endorsement, every concealed menace. And then she spotted it. A sentence tiny embedded in legal verbiage, but unlike others, it wasn't standard. It was deliberate, purposeful. Jasmine stiffened, scanned it repeatedly. Then she breathed. This wasn't solely about a claim. This was about obliteration. Her inhale snagged. What had her mother endorsed that rendered hush more precious than innovation? Jasmine didn't rest that night. She positioned at her mother's aged dining surface, the identical one, where diagrams were once doodled on tissues, now littered with duplicates, notepads, and 3 varied markers. The NDA tormented her. Not merely the terms, but the omissions. The voids, the revisions, the exactness of omission. One section wouldn't release her. Clause 4B, nestled midway in the pact like a latent bomb. Client retains power to edit or exclude all distinguishing demographic data of the primary maker were considered essential to match brand image. It wasn't jargon, it was engineered. And Jasmine had encountered it before in bias cases where brand uniformity coded for conceal if it's from someone of color. By dawn, she initiated the contact. He answered on the third tone, voice drowsy, uncertain. I haven't been there in over 10 years, the man stated. I've nothing remaining to offer. Jasmine didn't waver. I'm not requesting you offer, she responded. I'm requesting you recall. He hesitated, then consented. 60 minutes unofficial. No identities. The ex-procurement worker met her in a diner stall in outlying Virginia. Eyes scanning every few moments, like a man still vigilant long after pursuit ended. He carried nothing but recollection in one file. Inside was a digitized copy of the original NDA extracted from an old message thread. He never erased it. In those days I didn't probe, he stated. Now I regret not doing so. Jasmine leafed through the sheets. There it was anew. Clause 4B. But this occasion, something fresh. In the border, a remark in faint gray print, scarcely noticeable. Mark for ethnic reveal. Omit profile photo or race label in filing system. Verify removal prior to submission. She fixated on it. He leaned nearer. That wasn't routine. That originated from higher up. Who authorized? She queried, though her tone already bore doubt. He pushed the final sheet her way. It bore the mark of Lance Felton, Trump's top finance officer then. And below that, faintly hidden under electronic blackout, a second mark. Jasmine raised it to the illumination. Ink dimmed, partly veiled, but the arc of the uppercase D, the bold loop of the T. She had viewed that mark before on property documents, on litigations, on election funds. Donald J. Trump. Her breath halted. Her digits quivered, but her gaze didn't flicker. They hadn't merely interred her mother's identity. They scripted her out deliberately. Jasmine reclined in the stall file, pressed to her torso like a charged device. I require a duplicate, she stated. You truly planning to expose this? He inquired. She affirmed, gaze fixed on the mark along the diner surface, akin to the one on her mother's hand. What sort of realm must obliterate the palms that constructed it merely to endure? The illumination burned fiercer than usual, not because the fixtures altered, but because the hush had. There was an element in the atmosphere strained, charged like a gale, awaiting designation. C. Span's red tally light blinked again, fixing on Jasmine Crockett as she remained utterly motionless at the committee surface. The folder spread before her like a sealed accusation. America was observing, and this time Jasmine was prepared to articulate. She adjusted the microphone, her digits fluid, her stance unyielding. The Capitol chamber, once buzzing with whispers and sidelong looks, now held in stiff expectation. Across the divide, President Trump reclined in his position, eyes constricted. A man who had devoted his existence to dominating spaces was about to discover the sensation of entrapment in one. Jasmine commenced. Earlier this week, my staff secured a non-disclosure pact endorsed between Trump Lodgings and an independent creator, a creator who is my mother. The whispers resumed, soft, bewildered. She elevated a solitary sheet, printed neat, crisp, marked in yellow. Clause 4B, she proceeded explicitly, declares the following. She halted one pulse two, then recited term by term. Under no conditions shall the origin or demographic profile of said creator be disclosed in promotion or linked in any formal, internal, or external exchanges. The chamber didn't inhale sharply. It strangled. Legal assistants exchanged glances, lips tightening. A CNN banner refreshed mid-transmission. Phones vibrated. A law educator in Colorado halted mid-talk and replayed the feed. Jasmine held the sheet-firm gaze, never straying from the lens. This provision wasn't to safeguard ideas, she stated, her tone sharpening. It was to erase the individual behind them. She lowered the sheet, creased it once, then fixed her stare on Trump across the space. You didn't merely mute my mother, she articulated gradually, each word like a mallet. You censored her ethnicity. The space went motionless again, but this instance, it differed. No strain, no bewilderment, just collision. It struck like a delayed collision. Trump shuffled, folded his arms, unfolded them, tweaked his mic despite no one vocalizing. His lips parted slightly, but no phrases emerged. Viewers at residences sat dazed. A black mother, a wiped identity, a legal pact that enshrined invisibility. This transcended politics. It was primal, ancient keener. Jasmine didn't amplify her tone. She didn't necessitate it. She wasn't concealed because she was obscure, she persisted. She was concealed because she didn't align with the portrayal. Because her name, her complexion, her narrative didn't suit a pamphlet. A lawmaker in the rear gradually shut his folder. A young Latina journalist mouthed wholly something before halting herself on air. And in that instant, across myriad displays, folks weren't merely hearing. They were recollecting every occasion they'd been altered, cleansed, reduced, relabeled. Every time authority ensured they were unseen and termed it commerce. What sort of nation endorses away brilliance simply because it doesn't fit the mold? The display flickered to life. His visage was shadowed. Tone altered subtly, but it bore the undeniable burden of remorse. The man identifying as Mr. Smith had occupied the acquisition table when the omission began, and now decades later he was shattering it. Audiences drew closer. In every nook of America, the quiet was louder than speech. Chairwoman Ryan yielded the floor to Jasmine. She positioned with grace, the file still in her grasp, like an edge she wasn't done wielding. Mr. Smith, she initiated, you functioned as acquisition coordinator for Trump Lodgings from 2001 to 2008. His affirmation was minor, but the reply firm. Yes. You managed item choice and internal labeling coordination, Jasmine queried. Correct, he affirmed, including the ergonomic grips presented by Dolores Crockett. The pause that ensued felt like an extended breath. Yes. The space stilled. Jasmine advanced one pace toward the display. Did Donald Trump individually examine that item before the NDA issued? Mr. Smith's frame shifted as if the query's weight was tangible. Yes, he viewed the model. He inquired who devised it. Jasmine didn't flicker. What transpired next? The tone on the display dipped slightly. I informed him it stemmed from a black woman in Dallas, a lone parent, self-supported. He fell silent, then appended. He surveyed the space, then stated locate something paler or render it pale. The phrase landed like a gradual strike to the torso. Sharp breaths rippled softly. A junior aide dropped her writing tool. A congressman gazed ahead, lips separated but wordless. The display glimmered, but the tone remained steady. Legal was directed to form a provision, Mr. Smith continued. One that eliminated all demographic profile images, ethnicity, anything connecting the creator to her origins. It wasn't standard process. It was targeted. Jasmine clutched the file tighter. So Clause 4B, the one banning ethnic disclosure, was inserted by direct command. Yes, he affirmed from the pinnacle. She affirmed once nearly unnoticeably, like an advocate verifying the ultimate evidence she already possessed. Were there additional creators whose profiles were eliminated like this? She queried. The witness faltered, evidently distressed. At least 9. All women, all individuals of color. The term struck with precise force. Journalists typed swifter than they could inhale. Phones hummed. Headlines shaped instantly. One lawmaker whispered to another. No one grinned. Even Trump was hushed now, arms crossed, gaze narrowing, but powerless to halt what had already kindled. Jasmine retreated from the mic. She didn't elevate her tone. She didn't need to. So this wasn't an administrative choice, she declared. It was business tactic. The witness didn't respond. His quiet spoke volumes. The image on the display dimmed gradually to dark. The transmission ended, but the injury it inflicted was exposed and expanding. Jasmine pivoted toward the chamber, toward the millions still observing. Her tone, when it returned, was low and firm. You didn't merely wipe a woman's identity. You revised history to fit your mirror and then muted it. How many heritages were pilfered before someone ventured to voice a single one aloud? Jasmine didn't delay. Fewer than 24 hours after the informant's account shook the Capitol, she submitted a formal request via the Congressional Oversight Panel, seeking entry to Trump Lodging's acquisition records. The demand was precise internal logs of item design, pack details, and creator recognition from 2001 to 2011. No diversions, no blackouts, just identities or their lack. For 14 days, the documents arrived in droves, concealed PDFs, digitized bills, transport records, electronic notes with absent entries. Jasmine assembled a squad of volunteer investigators, legal scholars, data experts, even 2 veteran patent attorneys who convened in rotations, fueled by dark brew and indignation. It didn't take long for a trend to surface. Identity patent code item, then void. Of the 947 pieces examined from that period, over 300 lacked noted creator names. Instead, they were labeled as autonomous design, internal origin, or the now notorious tag, unattributed external party. But matching with the U.S. Patent Bureau narrated differently. Those items had identities, they had visages, they had humans. And the vast majority Black, Latina, Asian newcomer female, Jasmine positioned before the oversight chamber the day the graphic aired live. A massive LED panel illuminated behind her. A circle chart burst onto national screens. 33% of Trump lodging advancements had absent credit, and of those 92% tied to minority creators, subsequently stripped from brand resources. It wasn't a data sheet, it was a tally of losses. Sharp breaths echoed. One delegate fumbled his spectacles. A conservative outlet severed the transmission, only to have the video recirculated on social channels minutes later, with 20 million watches by dusk. Across the panel, identities began to materialize. Maria S. Lopez Kitchen Cooling Structure. Dr. Angeli Ralph Eco Filter Linen Trolley. Kamla Desai Voice-Activated Room Regulator. Dolores Crockett Ergonomic Fryer Grip. Some hadn't realized they were wiped. Others had perished without ever gaining acknowledgement. A few observed live. One, a 74-year-old Filipino lady in New Jersey, sank in sobs when she beheld her identity projected 50 feet tall after decades of disregard. Jasmine didn't boast. She didn't require it. She pivoted to the chamber and spoke as if honoring the departed. They didn't vanish, they were wiped. She elevated a storage drive holding the assembled report. 1 terabyte of interred narratives. This isn't oversight, she declared. It's pilferage masked as labeling. Trump, seated opposite, stared impassive. No grin, no counter, just the subdued awareness that the realm he erected on obscurity had finally been hauled into exposure. Jasmine sealed her device. These weren't phantom scribes, she stated. They were builders. And how many more builders remain out there concealed beneath another's realm? The camera transmission sparked alive. A man in a crisp white garment emerged on screen, his cuffs folded, his tone already quivering. His name was Elias Monroe, ex-head chef of Trump Tower, Chicago, withdrawn after 26 years in professional cook spaces. He wasn't a statesman, not a barrister, not accustomed to amplifiers. But today he arrived to articulate because quiet had tormented him too long. We termed it the edge, he declared, elevating a metal grip, encased in aging padding. We employed it daily, 7 posts, 3 rotations, ceaseless. He regarded it like something holy and regrettable simultaneously. What I didn't grasp is that it originated from a woman named Dolores Crockett. His tone fractured on the final term. I assumed it was standard gear. No tail, no identity. But now I comprehend someone forged this with her palms, and we wielded it for years without inquiring who. Jasmine observed from across the chamber. Silent, her core snagged in her throat. Behind her aides blinked away moisture. Monroe proceeded. We earned honors for productivity. We halved harms. The lodging deemed it transformative. He halted, then gazed down. I received praise. They presented me awards. I delivered addresses. But not once did I query the tool's source. He elevated the grip to the lens, still whole after years stored. His palms shook. She forged it superior to any man in that structure, and we utilized it like it belonged to us. Then his tone fractured. That acclaim wasn't mine solely. It pertained to her. I recognize that now, and I'm remorseful I didn't then. The transmission zoomed, the faded patent code still carved lightly into the steel hold. 45,611 Kelvin. The identical code Jasmine had recited into record. The same one Dolores had submitted from a South Dallas cook space with a simple pen and a vision no one desired to perceive. Elias steadied his breath, then gazed directly into the lens. I feel remorse, he declared. I devoted 20 years managing cook spaces in Trump's name, but I never paused to query whose foundation I stood upon. The chamber didn't applaud. It didn't necessitate it. The admission struck the web like a dam bursting. Within 60 minutes, Dolores forged that was surging across platforms. Thousands of women cooks, homemakers, technicians, tailors uploaded images of instruments they devised, enhanced, or inherited from mothers like Dolores. One clip displayed a teen girl clutching her grandmother's handmade stitching hole breathing. She never possessed a patent, but I know her identity. Across America, folks began etching Dolores into their kitchen instrument grips. Public backing swelled. Opinion pieces poured in. The Washington Post labeled it a confrontation for unseen ingenuity. Time periodical ran the title, The Woman Who Sustained the Realm and Was Never Repaid. And still Jasmine uttered nothing. She positioned at the chamber's border, observing the globe ignite not from fury, but from acknowledgement. Because truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it manifests as an elderly man clutching a overlooked instrument and finally uttering her name. But how many identities still dwell in cook spaces, in quiet, awaiting initial utterance? The rain hadn't commenced yet, but Washington felt damp with strain. There was a heaviness in the overcast and in the stares of all inside room 214, the type of strain that precedes a rupture. Jasmine Crockett, positioned near the chamber barrier, clutching the grip like an artifact retrieved from a lost conflict's ruins. The alloy was chill in her palm, but her vitality burned hot. The chairwoman summoned the next informant, and an aged woman advanced slowly, methodically, like each stride bore the burden of unresolved matters. Mrs. Thelma Green, longtime adjacent closest companion and selected sibling of Dolores Crockett. She donned a deep green jacket with frayed seams at the wrists and a neck wrap. Dolores had stitched the year Jasmine completed law studies. She didn't seat, she didn't require it. She departed believing she was overlooked, Thelma declared, pressing a photo to her chest. All she ever desired was to forge something tangible, something enduring. But she never witnessed that occur, not with her identity attached. Jasmine shut her eyes briefly, just sufficient to sense her mother's tone resonate in her mind's depths. Even if they seize your acclaim, child, never allow them seize your spirit. The spirit hadn't extinguished. It had merely awaited the proper moment to blaze. Thelma's tone grew keener. She observed the globe reap millions from her concept. She observed it appear in every lodging ad, in every cook dialogue, every cook display, and not once did anyone utter her identity. She didn't seek vengeance. She sought commemoration. There was quiet, not the vacant sort, but the loaded variety. And then Jasmine rose. She advanced gradually, heels echoing like justice's rhythm down the stone path. In her grasp was the instrument, the original model steel curved by heat and fingers, padding eroded by years of use. It resembled nothing opulent, but it was all. She believed she was unseen, Jasmine declared, halting at the chamber's core. They ensured it. A pact crafted to mute her leaders, trained to cleanse her identity. A president who perceived her complexion before her talent. But she didn't fade. She lingered right here in this instrument, in these palms. She arrived at the stand and placed the model on a transparent exhibit base. The lights captured the edge of the inscribed code like it radiated. Patent 4,561 Kelvin. Crockett D. The chamber released a breath. Lenses zoomed. One Congress member lowered his head. I brought this here, Jasmine proceeded, because they assumed interring her would be simple. That if they wiped her on record, she'd vanish in annals. But the thing about mothers like mine is they don't depart softly. Beyond the chamber, the avenue swelled. Women clutched instruments in the downpour, meat gauges, hair cutters, woodworking measures. Some with identity scrawled in marker across the grips, some with none whatsoever. Yet inside, Jasmine's tone didn't fracture. She forged something that nourished a realm. Now we utter her identity, and we utter it boldly. Her digits brushed the steel one final time. Then she gazed into the lens. What transpires when the visage they interred becomes the visage the nation refuses to overlook? The quiet after Jasmine placed the model was overwhelming. Not uneasy, not discomforting, just complete, like a courtroom moments before judgment. Cameras swept between countenances, stunned, tight-mouthed, immobilized in the moment's severity. For once, even the analysts had no twist. The nation wasn't responding, it was absorbing. Then Trump shattered it. He inclined forward in his seat, toned louder than needed terms, honed by unexpected humiliation. There she proceeds again, he declared, half chuckling, half ejecting. A vocal attorney with a grudge, always portraying the sufferer. He pivoted to the assembly with open limbs, like a poor entertainer, hunting cheers. Frankly, if she devoted half as much time to labor as to speaking, she might achieve something. He halted, then delivered the strike. You know my opinion, I think she should rest. Then the halt and the turn. He grinned. Rest, young lady. The chamber didn't inhale sharply this time. It didn't require it. The collision wasn't in the loudness. It was in the resonance. Rest, young lady. 3 terms that hadn't shifted meaning in over a century. 3 terms reeking of verandas and sermons, tribunals and fields, executive rooms and shattered barriers. 3 terms too many black women had endured for far too long. Jasmine didn't recoil. She didn't amplify her tone. She didn't advance to the mic. She stepped into the chamber's heart like she belonged there eternally. You instructed me to rest, she declared, tone, even calm, crushing. But I didn't arrive here to rest. She locked her stare on him. I arrived here to rise. And then it occurred. One by one, the observers began to elevate. First, a woman in a navy garment in the rear, then a young soldier, then a Republican aide whose palms trembled as she rose, then a veteran, then an educator, then a lawmaker. They didn't articulate. They merely rose in quiet with her. Across the land, it was unfolding too. Airports, classrooms, eateries, family rooms. Viewers on the stream began uploading self-images rising. I Rise with Her surged to over 10 million references in 60 minutes. Back in the chamber, Trump scanned around, but the act concluded. His grin wavered. The cheers he anticipated never materialized. Only quiet and the gentle noise of feet lifting from seats. Jasmine remained firm, shoulders aligned, her mother's phantom at her rear. This isn't about stance, she declared. It's about existence. And some of us have awaited eras just to occupy room. In the chamber, Congress, the nation, the globe was finally observing her occupy it. But what transpires when one woman rises and the entire nation joins? The segment struck the broadcasts before Congress even paused. Jasmine's terms, I arrived here to rise, were ubiquitous. TikTok, CNN, NPR, Fox, terminal screens, school projectors. Her serene tone, overlaid with the ascending quiet of hundreds rising around her, became the visual pulse of a country awakening. But what ensued wasn't clamor. It was echo. From Detroit to Dallas, women rose. A server in a Waffle House garb elevated amid a morning rotation and held a flipper like a banner. A caregiver on her midday in rural Tennessee rose beside her medical cart, palm over heart, gaze fixed on a stream. A retired Marine in a mobility chair saluted as she rose, not bodily but openly, her grandchild recording through sobs. Clips flooded. In a Harlem haircut spot, the television sound increased as the room hushed. At an Orange County nail spot, a line of women halted mid-treatment to rise united. Polish tools suspended midair like time paused. In an Omaha school dining hall, a 6th grade instructor displayed the moment on a screen, then rose silently before her pupils. One by one, the youth followed. CNN assembled the footage in hours. The piece was titled, From Cook Space to Capitol, The Women Who Rose. The compilation ran 3 minutes. No voiceover, just Jasmine's tone beneath soft keys, layered with visions of women ascending, line chefs, bookkeepers, technicians, seniors with air tanks, youths in baggy tops. Even Fox News, momentarily shaken by the surge, broadcast the segment, though clumsily presented. But truth once released rarely conforms to the tale. And then arrived the instant no one foresaw. During an exclusive transmission, Representative Lydia Marks, a balanced Republican, noted more for quiet than rebellion, appeared live on MSNBC. She viewed the segment moisture gathering but never dropping. When queried why she had rejoined the oversight chamber after months away, her reply was one phrase: He recalled why I departed the room last time, she declared, but she recalled why I returned. The host stilled. No pursuit, just the noise of folks remembering that governance was once about humans, not factions. Back in the Capitol, Jasmine positioned in a serene corridor just outside the chamber, observing the surge expand. An aide neared her breathless, displaying the refreshed figures. I Rise with Her had hit 11.2 million uploads. Dolores Forge that had exceeded 5 million. Schools held sessions. Churches reprinted notices. Sewing groups in Mississippi stitched Dolores's identity into garment edges. But Jasmine didn't rejoice. Not yet, because rising was merely the start. She gazed down at the flooring beneath her feet, the same gleaming surface where so many had been instructed to diminish, to hush, to rest. Then she gazed up. If this is what one woman's identity could accomplish, what might occur when we utter them all? The headline struck every cover simultaneously. Congress initiates probe into ethnic wiping of creators. But behind the official label was something profounder, a crack finally pried wide. The sessions weren't just routine, they were epochal. The administration wasn't merely noting anymore. It was noting identities. On the morning of the declaration, room 214 overflowed. Not with onlookers, but with intensity. The oversight panel voted 18-4 for establishing a cross-party group to examine racially muted intellectual assets, a term never voiced in a congressional order until now. And at the core of that order stood one identity, Jasmine Crockett. The proposal passed without dissent. She would lead the group. The child of the woman they attempted to wipe would now be the woman tasked with revealing them all. It wasn't just lyrical, it was explosive. Journalists swarmed the passage. Legal interpreters rushed to clarify the example. One scholar on NPR simply breathed, "This hasn't occurred before. Not like this." Not with a sitting president entangled not by hearsay but by documentation. Inside her workspace, Jasmine positioned before a blank board, already inscribed with identities. She had them sorted by patent, by era, by omission. Some had departed, others had faded, but each signified a flame awaiting rekindling. Her initial contact was to the U.S. Patent Bureau, her second to the Commerce Division, her third to a volunteer alliance of rights advocates prepared to contest every pilfered identity back into annals if needed. No one queried tactics. They only queried one thing. Will he testify? That inquiry hummed through every news, space, court hall, and broadcast program in the land. The man who had evaded summons, stormed from dialogues, and erected a heritage on managed amplifiers was now teetering on being compelled to respond, not just about funds or governance, but about identities, about theft, about who constructed the realm under his identity while being cleansed from history. Behind sealed doors, Trump's legal squad circled like predators around a faltering vessel. His counselors implored him to decline, but he didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't merely about shielding his label, it was about pride. And for a man like him, quiet was tougher than falsehoods. In a media gathering that afternoon, Jasmine positioned at the stand, hair-bound cuffs folded not to gentle but to indicate preparedness. "We're not probing shadows," she declared. "We're tracing the path of marks they assumed no one would follow. This isn't a seizure, it's a revival." She didn't flicker when the journalist posed the query everyone craved answered. "If summoned, do you think the president will testify?" Jasmine held her breath for a moment. Then she grinned, not as a statesman but as a child who had already surfaced truth. "We'll discover," she declared, "under oath." But when authority is finally positioned under oath, does it articulate or does it flee? The noise wasn't booming, but it sliced the air like an edge. A solitary voice recording dated the 12th of March, 2010, played from the chamber's speakers. Dolores Crockett's tone, warm and quivering, filled the space. No melody, no analysis, just the gravity of a mother who had once dared to envision and now feared she had delayed too long to articulate. "Baby, I know I should have resisted fiercer, but I thought perhaps quiet was securer. Perhaps they just seize the instrument, seize the funds, and permit us to endure. But now I rue every endorsement." The room didn't stir. Not even the journalists inscribed. No one desired to miss a sound. Jasmine positioned at the center, not articulating, not shifting, allowing the tone of a woman who once curved steel with her bare palms to bear justice's weight. That segment didn't remain limited to Capitol Hill. By the following dawn, the sound had spread widely. Dolores articulates trending across every channel. Churches commenced Sunday gatherings with her terms echoing from wooden stands. Veterans played it during morning assembly. TikTok used crafted collages of their mothers, grandmothers, and great aunts, listening to Dolores's tone through moisture-filled gazes. A roadside eatery in Ohio played it via its music machine. A high school instructor in Georgia halted class and activated it. Across the nation, America wasn't observing anymore. It was hearing. And each time Dolores articulated, her tone strengthened. In one recording, she depicted sketching her blueprints on shopping slips between rotations. In another, she breathed, "Do you comprehend what it's like to observe your own creation, nourish the wealthy, and famish your identity?" But the ultimate recording, left weeks before her departure, tore the quiet wide. "If you ever articulate for me, Jasmine, don't just name me. Name the others. Name every palm they wiped." Jasmine didn't sob. She didn't stumble. She simply unfolded her notepad and began to inscribe one identity, then another, dozens, manually. Because her mother hadn't just requested justice, she had provided a diagram for it. CNN replayed the recordings hourly. MSNBC aired a dual-part feature titled "The Tone They Interred." Even Fox News, typically adversarial, didn't sever the transmission. Something about Dolores's timbre, even as she weakened, left no space for dispute. A Capitol aide later stated it was like America heard its moral sense and realized it sounded like someone's mother. The query now wasn't whether Dolores's tone had returned. It was this: how many tones were interred with her, and which one would Jasmine reveal next? It wasn't an armament. It wasn't a document or a litigation. It was a missive, folded at the creases, penned in blue ink, on aging paper, endorsed Dolores Crockett. Jasmine clutched it in her palm like it bore the globe. There were no lenses when Dolores inscribed it, no counselors. Just a woman, weary, overlooked, and still aspiring the man who erected structures on her foundation might one day utter her identity. Jasmine positioned before the Congressional Space Corps, pounding like a hammer, and began to recite aloud. "Mr. Trump," she initiated, steady and clear, "I am the deviser of the instrument your lodging cook spaces employ every single day. I am not requesting funds. I'm requesting that you recognize the intellect that forged it." Quiet gripped the space again. Not the stunned quiet of insult, but the respectful sort when history finally articulates. "I nurtured a child while fusing steel and folding fabrics. I submitted patents, attached buttons to garb, and sustained the home with gratuities and faith. I know what it feels like to pass a structure that nourishes thousands and realize it's using your palms but not your identity." Jasmine's tone fractured, but she didn't halt. "I know my ethnicity. I know my gender. I know these things were not invisible to you, but I aspired. I aspired they didn't have to be barriers." In family rooms from Brooklyn to Bakersfield, observers leaned nearer. Some gripped mugs with quivering palms. Others reached for already depleted tissue containers. "I don't desire celebrity. I desire heritage. If you utter my identity, even once, it tells my child that dignity doesn't require approval." And then came the concluding line: "Even if you never utter my identity, I'll instruct my child to rise tall." Jasmine gazed up. Her eyes glistened, but her palms didn't quiver. In that moment, she wasn't reciting a missive. She was reciting a testament, a ultimate directive passed from mother to child. Not of retribution, but of resistance wrapped in elegance. All across America, devices illuminated. Captures of the missive flooded social clusters and religious chats. Hashtags like "Name Her Missive to Authority" and "Dolores Merits Better" surged within minutes. One woman in Detroit inscribed, "I penned a missive like that once. Never dispatched it either." A man in Texas uploaded, "This recalls my mom. She cleansed floors in structures she could never afford to enter." And in the space, Trump didn't articulate for once. His tongue, always keen, stayed concealed. Because the missive wasn't for Congress. It wasn't even for him anymore. It was for every woman who ever breathed the truth into obscurity and wondered if anyone would ever hear. But Jasmine was hearing now. And the only query left suspended in that sacred space was, what would America do now that it had read her mother's terms too? The space had lapsed into the sort of quiet no hammer could shatter. Dolores's missive still resonated in the walls, like it had reconfigured the air itself. Jasmine stood immobile, the paper quivering lightly in her grasp, not from dread, but from the weight of all left unspoken. She reached into her jacket and unfolded a second sheet. The borders were sharper, the ink recent, but the tone raw, unfiltered, belonged to a child speaking across eras. This one, she declared softly, is for my mother. She inhaled once, then recited, Dear Mama, she initiated the terms gentle but purposeful. You said if they never uttered your identity, you'd still instruct me to rise tall. You did, and I did. And now I need you to hear what your quiet forged. Outside, the skies over D.C. were dull, but in homes across America, television screens seemed brighter. You told me once the globe wasn't crafted for women like us, that we had to forge space where none existed. You used tape to bind devices and scarred palms to nourish me. And every time you attached a garb for someone, wealthier, louder, or harsher, you attached a bit of yourself into me. Jasmine halted. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't blink it away. You were wiped from annals because you weren't sellable, because your complexion wasn't impartial enough. But I preserved your diagrams, I preserved your tone, and I ensured the globe couldn't avert its gaze anymore. Observers leaned in. Some pressed palms over their mouths, others simply sobbed. They erected structures on your toil. They served dishes with your instruments, but they never served your identity. So I transformed it into a banner, a directive, a confrontation. Her tone rose not in loudness, but in weight. You once said, we don't get to inscribe history. We just endure it. But today I say, no, Mama. We inscribe it in ink, in law, in flame, if we must. And then came the concluding line, her tone now a breath in a storm. They didn't utter your identity, so I turned it into a surge. The space didn't applaud. It didn't need to. The quiet had its own acclaim, the sort that only happens when truth finally locates its tone. Social channels erupted again. Missive to Mama. We utter her identity. Program hosts wipe moisture between segments. A bookkeeper in Atlanta ordered a fresh section for Black women devisers. A instructor in Kansas altered Monday's plan. And Jasmine creased the missive gently like it was holy. In a city erected on memorials and men, she had forged something louder than rock memory transformed into justice. But as the resonances settled, one query remained carved now into the public moral sense, hanging like an ember over dry fuel. What will history declare now that Dolores Crockett finally articulated and her child responded? The marble roof of the Capitol shimmered under a late spring glow. Clear heavens, no breeze, just a sort of quiet that felt deserved. Inside the space no longer resonated with disputes, but with ritual. Jasmine Crockett positioned at the heart of it all. Her stance as upright as the banner behind her, clutching a document sealed with gold, the Dolores Act. It had taken 374 days, 4 sessions, 2 delays, and 1 identity repeated in every state, every tongue, every time someone declared she merited more. Now it was directive. The Dolores Act, federal safeguard and backdated credit for minority devisers, muted by NDAs, corporate revisions, and ethnic exclusion. A fresh bureau would review patent records. Compensation resources were forming. The endorsements were recent, but the wounds it aimed to mend were older than the structure itself. Jasmine didn't grin. She inhaled deeply as if her mother's essence was woven into the ink. Outside in the garden of the National Devisers Hall of Fame, hundreds assembled under blooming cherry trees. Journalists, technicians, scholars, cooks, folks who once felt unseen, now standing in sunlight. The announcer's tone rang out. Today we induct Dolores Crockett, after her passing, as one of the most impactful, uncredited devisers of the 20th century. A hush. Then Jasmine advanced. In her grasp, the same eroded blueprint her mother doodled on the back of a junk letter. She didn't encase it. She didn't protect it. She laid it softly inside the museum display, like a fragment of the founding document. She never requested a monument, Jasmine declared to the assembly. She just desired the truth to endure the deception. People applauded, but not like a performance, like a burial and a revival. A ex-Trump Tower cook observed from the third line, eyes moist. Beside him, a Black teen girl elevated her own creation. A collapsible cook grip with Dolores inspired me scrawled in marker across the hold. Across the land, schools added a fresh identity to history sessions. Patent bureaus received 600 new submissions in 24 hours. TikTok surged with a soundbite, Jasmine's tone declaring, "We forged the cook space." And as she pivoted from the stand, Jasmine breathed into the air. Not for amplifiers, not for annals, but for one woman interred beneath years of quiet. Mama, they finally uttered your identity. But history now hearing had a louder response on the horizon. Because the ink had scarcely dried, the surge had only just initiated, and one query refused to fade from America's lips. If one muted woman could ignite a federal directive, how many more realities are still concealed beneath the foundations of authority? He hadn't uttered her identity once during the sessions. Not when the NDA provision emerged. Not when the cook brought the model into the space. Not even when Dolores forged that overshadowed his own rally tags. But after the Dolores Act passed with Jasmine's visage all over the covers, Donald J. Trump surfaced from his quiet shadows like a man wronged. The headline broke just past midnight. Trump submits $200 million defamation claim over Dolores Act repercussions. In a 17-page legal filing, his barristers asserted the act had permanently harmed Trump Lodging's heritage and spitefully distorted contractual natures. Cable channels scrambled. Analysts honed their narratives. But Jasmine, she didn't hesitate. This isn't about his label, she informed journalists. It's about her identity. The courtroom was packed. Judges, journalists, and ex-staff lined the barriers, anticipating a tempest. Trump entered with his typical stride, flanked by a legal squad that appeared more uneasy than assured. Jasmine didn't bring a group, just a plain file and an image of her mother. The judge scanned the filing, adjusted her lenses, and declared only 3 terms. 12 minutes break, no one shifted. Lenses weren't permitted. But the air inside hummed like it was streaming to the nation's soul. When proceedings resumed, the judge's decision came swift. Harsh and apocal case rejected on basis of factual support, shielded congressional speech, and dominant public concern. The hammer fell like thunder. Trump didn't linger to exchange grips or twist the defeat. He departed through the rear passage, his expression blank. Outside journalists pleaded for remark. He uttered nothing but America articulated. Segments of the rejection spread across channels like blaze. TikTok surged with the label 12 Minutes to Liberty. Editorials proclaimed it a ultimate stake in the casket of heritage cleansing. One New York Times article read, "When quiet is shattered, history doesn't regret, it rectifies." And in a serene corner of the Capitol steps, Jasmine sat solitary for the first time in months. No lenses, no declarations, just one palm resting on Dolores's image and the other on the file that initiated it all. Some conflicts end in quiet, others resonate. And this one still had one query floating in the air unresolved, impossible to disregard. What will the next child do when her mother's reality is still locked behind an endorsement? She hadn't entered the residence in years. The walls still bore the faint aroma of aged oil and floral. Yellow diagrams curled at the edges on the cooler door, affixed with time's persistence, like the woman who drafted them. Jasmine positioned in the entry of her mother's cook space, the room where all began and all was taken. She took one breath, then entered. The surface hadn't shifted. Neither had the notch in the corner where Dolores used to strike her elbow when a draft failed. Jasmine traced her digits over the marked, covering the same plane where meals were served and concepts were born. Her gaze landed on the aged pan, the initial model still there, still sturdy. From her outerwear pocket, Jasmine extracted the metal congressional honor of inventive input awarded after passing. She didn't encase it. She laid the award on the cook surface beside a dimmed image of her mother in a oily covering, clutching a tool like a blade. Jasmine didn't sob. She just affirmed once, like answering a query only the image had posed. "We brought it home." Then she pivoted and faced the only lens in the room. Not as a congresswoman, not as a banner, but as a child. "This isn't about cook spaces," she declared. "It's about who gets remembered." And as she positioned beneath the same roof that once stifled her mother's ambition, she didn't close a tale. She opened a surge. Some identities never make it onto patents or banners, but they endure in every instrument we touch and every child who dares to articulate when quiet is anticipated. Not everyone is remembered by annals, but everyone has the power to rewrite it with the reality they refuse to enter. If there's something you wish you had articulated sooner, isn't today the right time to articulate it? If this tale struck a chord, don't just move on. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. True Stories, where overlooked tones rise and interred heritages articulate loudest. Hit the notification icon, because the next reality we reveal might not just alter history, it might alter how we see our mothers. Which part of Dolores's path will you carry onward? Drop a comment, because quiet built the past, but your tone builds what comes next. This dramatized tale is inspired by real challenges and real folks. All characters and exchanges are fictionalized for reflection and learning. It is not meant to harm or deceive, but to encourage thought and community awareness. Thanks for observing. Truth isn't finished. It's just awaiting someone to listen.